Hello and welcome to another fun episode of Gar Borras' Time Machine. This is episode 30, part 3 of our Tonight Show special. And today Gar had a real great idea when we did episode 30, part 1, which is, hey, why don't we talk about not just the history of the Tonight Show, but some of the guests on the Tonight Show and the people who really got their career started because of the Tonight Show. And of course, when we left off last time, Gar, I should say, when we started off with part 2, it was 1962. Johnny Carson takes over host of the Tonight Show from Jack Parr, of course. And once again, I like to kind of think back on what was going on in the world historically at that time. And a couple things I came across that I thought worth mentioning. April 16th, 1962 to be exact, Walter Cronkite takes over as the lead news anchor on CBS Evening News, during which time he would become the most trusted man in all of TV news media for years to come. And that's a big thing, especially if you look at the world today and all this fake news stuff. I mean, when people watch Walter Cronkite back in the day, he was a reliable source. People thought, oh, okay, if he said it, it is true. Now, also in 1962, President of the United States is none other than John F. Kennedy. Interesting, huh?
Yes. Yeah, it was the 60s.
Yeah.
Very, for a long time after the 1960s, when you look at history, the 1960s kind of jumps out as a very transitional decade. There's a lot of changes that occurred. So there's all kinds of stuff that occurred back in the 60s. And then after the 60s, everything kind of died down. Yeah, now just to stick on the 60s for a minute, I mean, I can kind of sum the 60s up in 3 words. Peace, love, flower power. Well, that was part of it.
Yeah.
A very large, and that was the biggest part of it. That were the catalyst for change. There was so much more that was going on during that time. It was very volatile.
Oh, sure.
During that time, and then everything got boring.
Yeah.
The 70s and the 80s and the 90s.
I mean,
there was, and then all of a sudden now, here we are, 2022. The 2020s, and we're back to being volatile.
Oh yeah, it's almost kind of full circle. And another thing I think you brought up in regards to the 60s in a past episode, the 60s also gave birth to tie-dye. I mean, you did not see tie-dye until the 1960s, and that would become a huge fashion trend. Even you see people still wearing tie-dye today, and it would become a thing like with the Grateful Dead. Another thing that I thought was interesting took place specifically May 10th, 1962. That's when Marvel Comics published the very first issue of the Incredible Hulk comic book. So again, just kind of to give people a reference point of where we are in the world in 1962 when Johnny Carson takes over the Tonight Show. Now, another thing before we really get into today's episode, I wanted to be sure to kind of touch base on a little. As Jay Leno leaves the Tonight Show, the thing was Conan was supposed to take over, and he comes on for about a year. But the reason I found out, and I'm going to be posting some of these videos because there are a lot of videos talking about Conan's departure from the Tonight Show, and a huge reason was when his ratings started to drop after he took over the Tonight Show. The suits at NBC decided, okay, we're gonna bring Jay Leno back, but we're going to give him a separate show. But the Jay Show is going to be on at 11:30, and we're going to move a Tonight Show to 12:30. And Conan was kind of laughing and saying, wait a minute, so the Tonight Show is going to be on tomorrow? I don't think so. And that was a big reason why he finally just kind of walked away.
Well, he really did not get
a fair shake
from the NBC brass.
There you go.
Because I was watching the show when he took over, and it was hilarious. I mean,
yeah.
He was doing an absolutely fantastic job at making it funny.
Yeah.
He had elements to what he brought to the Tonight Show that just hilarious.
Yeah, and just to kind of finally wrap that part of the show up about Conan O'Brein, so he would leave the Tonight Show, and I think for the next 30 years he would go over to TBS, which is a much smaller cable station, and it was one of the only original things TBS had at the time on their station, late night, and the thing was, Conan would go on to have huge popularity. He'd be on TBS for like the next 30 years before that show would kind of end its reign. Now we're going to really get into part 3 now, Gar, which is talking about some of the guests and people that really got their start on the Tonight Show. So before I get into my list, who are some of the people you came up with that you thought were really noteworthy and got their start on the Tonight Show?
Well, I go back, and a lot of these people that I'll mention, younger people won't even know who they are. Yeah. But just understand, back in the 60s and the 70s, which is, really, the 70s was the
crown jewel. The crown jewel.
The success of the Tonight Show, and it really was at the height of its popularity during the 70s. So, there's so many people that were guests on the show.
Oh, sure.
That younger generations are not going to know who they were, but during the time they were huge.
Oh, sure.
People, and of course, how can you not have a successful transition from Jack Parr to Johnny Carson without having his first episode as the Tonight Show host being introduced by Groucho Marx?
Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah.
That's a send off that it's impossible to if you're not successful with a send off like that, you're pretty much doomed. But the list is so long of all of these people that were guests, during this time. Dr. Joyce Brothers was huge. I mean, she was on all the time, and during that time period, she was, for mental health and
well-being, counseling,
information like that. She was like the considered one of the more expert people on those type of issues. So of course during that time, we just came out of the 60s, which is love, free love, and all that kind of stuff, and it was the sexual revolution.
Oh, sure.
And all that stuff. So because you have that happening in the 60s, now in the 70s, we get experts on sex therapist experts and stuff like that, and that was her popularity because of the sexual revolution. That spawned her popularity, and she was a guest on there all the time, and it was guests from all different types of entertainment. There was news people like Ted Koppel.
Sure, yeah.
Institutions like Betty White.
In fact, Betty White, I seen a clip of her talking about before she ever did the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, which was a lot of people first saw her. She was actually on the Jack Parr show before that, so she kind of dates back to the Tonight Show even before Johnny Carson was on. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, but it's just, so many people from, Charlton Heston was
we talked about him.
A regular guest on the show all the time back in those days. And it was really kind of neat because Johnny, when you read people voicing their feelings about being on the show.
Yeah.
It's just a common thing for virtually every one of his guests that he made them feel at ease.
Yeah, and the interesting thing,
which really facilitated them feeling comfortable about being themselves on the show, which was really what made the show popular, because people tuned in because they didn't want to see Charlton Heston acting like one of the characters in his movies. They wanted to see Charlton Heston what he's like in his normal life.
Yeah.
When he's just talking and chatting like if you're at a party and you're talking to him.
And the thing that Johnny
So
Carson...
he just really facilitated that and made people made the guests feel at ease. And he really, and they keep always saying this, he really facilitated the guests looking good.
And Johnny Carson was a real master. He had of the guest host slots on the show because... what's interesting, part of the reason I do not like the current Tonight Show is Jimmy Fallon decided when he took over of it, he didn't want to have guest hosts. He just decided on the days when he's not there, they'll just rerun a show. I mean, so that's something new. But if you go and you look at some of these guest hosts they had over the years, like Phyllis Diller, Joan Rivers, even Bill Cosby. We're going to talk about some of these people later. You would see these people on the Tonight Show, and they were so good just as a guest that they would get welcomed back as a guest host. Johnny's not here. We think you are good enough to come and guest host the Tonight Show. And you got to remember back in the day, especially the 70s and 80s, even the 60s. I mean, it was first such a thing for many of these up and coming comedians to get on the Tonight Show, but to be welcomed as a guest host, that was another pinnacle that you have reached a point where you're not just good to kind of do your act on our stage, but we want you to come back when Johnny's not here and take over the hosting duties, when he's out sick or whatever.
Well, it had to be an honor to be invited to do that. But when you watch, other hosts, I think, it really kind of shows how Johnny was a master at really facilitating his guests and really not making it obvious. Because when you watch it, it really was never obvious that he was facilitating his guests. But when the guests are interviewed after being, on the show and voicing their thoughts, it's a very common theme that they were always, pointing out at how he really, he was so gracious to the guests because he could easily make you not look good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but he always, that was his form of graciousness, was that he always facilitated the guests and in allowing them to comfortably do what they were doing on the show and talking about the things that and it really allowed them to open up. Yeah,
and what's interesting is in Los Angeles, where you and I are from, Gar, every night, anybody's got antenna TV, they can go and watch old reruns of the Johnny Carson era of the show. And they do that because that was the most popular era of the show. People love to watch those old episodes for the very reason you just said, that Johnny not only did he make the guest feel so so loved, he gave them a place to kind of spotlight their talent, and it could go one of two ways, like you said. Johnny Carson, if he loved you, he would really kind of shine the spotlight on you. But if you were somebody he didn't care too much, even if you were on the Tonight Show, he was willing to kind of spice it up and mix it up with you, and that was for the sole purpose of providing the audience, with entertainment, and that's what made it so much fun. You really didn't know but you watch these old episodes now, and you can kind of see, okay, like when he's doing an episode of Bill Cosby or somebody, or even, John Ritter or Rodney Dangerfield, these are people that he really liked, and you could tell that he's kind of real, he'd always welcome him back, and he's having a fun conversation, and you could see right away if he liked them or not. But let's go down some of the list of the people that he really, and you're right, it's so hard to come up with the list because, I mean, we could do hours and hours, and it would take tons of episodes. But like just some that I really thought stood out. Do you remember Phyllis Diller?
Phyllis Diller, I mean, she was a guest host.
Yeah.
Too, and she's just another one of those names that younger generations really know nothing about. But back in the 60s and the 70s, I think it even goes back to the 50s.
You're right, Gar.
Real young.
You're right. You're right.
She was a extremely famous female comedian, which was very unusual because during say you go back to the 40s, female comedians didn't exist.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't until the 50s that female comedians started exploring with doing it, and so she was one of those groundbreaking female comedians from the 50s.
Way before her.
And her famous thing was her hair was always a complete mess.
Yeah. I don't know if those were.
But that was part of her thing.
Yeah, her act. Yeah.
It was a thing that comedians did that reaches back. Say you go back to Hee Haw, Minnie Pearl's thing was alwaways wearing a hat with the price tag hanging from it.
I mean, just to give people a visual.
And people don't know who Minnie Pearl is, but she was famous also from a long time ago. But that kind of gives you an idea how everybody kind of had their catchphrase kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something. It was a visual kind of. And for Phyllis Diller, it was her hair. Her hair was always a complete and total mess.
Yeah, that's what she was known for, and in fact, it was kind of part of her identity. How you'd see that hair, even maybe like in a silhouette of her coming out, and you knew right away who it was. I mean, just to kind of give people a visual. This is way before like 80s rock or anything, but she kind of in her day looked like a female version of CeCe DeVille as far as her hair.
Well, yeah, it was a mess.
Yeah.
And but people loved it. I mean, when somebody would be talking about Phyllis Diller, you could never talk about Phyllis Diller without mentioning her hair.
Yeah, and that was what was kind of her identity, as much as her jokes. Now, let me just tell you a little more what I was able to find out about Phyllis Diller's history. Phyllis Diller's first national television appearance was on, get this, Groucho Marx's quiz show as a contestant in 1958, and then had multiple bookings on Jack Parr's Tonight Show, that which then led to an appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, which got her national attention as a stand-up comedian. Starting in 1959 throughout the 1960s, she released comedy albums. Now, again, Phyllis Diller influenced other comedians such as Joan Rivers, Lily Tomlin, Ellen DeGeneres, Margaret Cho, and Roseanne Barr. Now, these are all, big time, women comedians these days that we've heard these names. And again, Phyllis Diller was really the first of the crowd. She really paved the way for all these other people.
Well, and she's just one.
She's just one. But again, and just looking at Phyllis Diller,
the list just goes on and on. Tiny Tim.
Yeah. I remember that guy. Yeah.
He got married on the Tonight Show.
Wow.
Joey Bishop.
Yeah.
Was very famous.
Famous comedian in his own right.
Way before he was ever on Tonight Show, but and he was very famous as an actor, but he was also very famous as a stand-up comedian too.
Yep.
And he was also a guest host many times, on the Tonight Show. But Joey Bishop,
he had his own show, the Joey Bishop Show, back in the day.
Buddy Hackett.
Yeah.
People don't know who Buddy Hackett was. Joey Bishop, Buddy Hackett. These are names that were huge names.
Oh, sure.
Back in
1950s,
the day.
yeah.
And Buddy Hackett was one of those kind of wild card guests where you really didn't know what he was going to do.
Oh, sure,
You know what I mean? He was kind of, he had the element of danger.
Yeah.
Even though it always turned into hilarious comedy. But that was part of Buddy Hackett's thing was that he was out of control.
Yeah.
And he visually too, because when you even looked at him, you know what I mean? He had this visualness that he was out of control.
Yeah, there were many people like that. Another one that really deserves an honorable mention here is Rodney Dangerfield. I mean, he got his start on the Tonight Show, and after appearing on the Tonight Show, he would go back and make several appearances. But that's how he really got his start as a stand-up comedian, and then he started playing in clubs across the United States, and that's one of the first places people ever heard of Rodney Dangerfield. And I'm going to be posting some of these episodes of the Tonight Show he did with Johnny Carson, and Johnny Carson really loved Rodney Dangerfield, and every time
they made for such great comedy because they were, what Johnny was really. When you talk to guests were always saying that Johnny was a master of being a comedian.
Yeah.
But he was also a master of being the straight man.
Oh, yeah.
And what he would do was when his guests would be doing their comedian, comedic, things, Johnny would shift to being a straight man.
And you make them part of the show.
Facilitating their comedy, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He would, whatever Johnny would do would be complimenting what his guests would be doing.
In fact,
and then when they're not, then he would shift to comedian. You see what I mean? So he would shift between the two in facilitating the guests.
Yeah, in a way.
And the guests were the ones that pointed that out because the audience really never was picking up on this stuff.
I mean, I don't think a lot of people were aware back in the day, when you're seeing these episodes of The Tonight Show, for the very first time they ever aired. And the thing of it is, I think most people agree, Johnny Carson was not just a great comedian, a great host. He was the truest sense of the word MC, masters of ceremony, almost like the Tonight Show ringmaster, where it was not all about him. He'd make the guests really part of the show, and he'd kind of steer the show however he wanted it to steer in whatever direction. And like, let's say he has Rodney Dangerfield on, he'd make Rodney Dangerfield as much a part of that episode, the star of his show, as he was.
Well, they could just trade one-liners.
Yeah.
Johnny Carson that was his forte.
Yeah.
That's what made him famous and so appealing when he was doing that game show before he got the Tonight Show gig. Was he was really good at being quick-witted with one-liners.
Yeah.
And he brought that to the Tonight Show. And then when you put him together with somebody like Rodney Dangerfield, which is also, really good at one-liners, man, you're just talking two guys that could just
go on for days. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what I mean? But then again, it's the magic of why it was so good. He was so good at facilitating his guests.
Yeah, and
another one, Don Rickles.
Don Rickles, yeah.
Another one that was really good at,
back and forth, yeah.
with the the element of basically ripping on people.
Yeah.
That was Don Rickles' thing, and so you put him together with Johnny, and if it was Don Rickles is going off on his comedic, then Johnny would shift over to being straight. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, sure.
And it would just, he would just shift back and forth, at whatever was needed, which really kept everything going at a really nice pace.
Yeah, and another guy that got his start of a Tonight Show, which I really think we need to mention, is Andy Kaufman. People will know him as Locke Gravis, the foreigner on the TV show Taxi, and that would come after he appeared on the Tonight Show. And I was going back and finding old clips of when he appeared on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and that is where that little foreigner act kind of originated, on the Tonight Show. And so when he got cast on Taxi, that's how they got the idea for it. But he was so good in that foreigner character, Gar, that I remember, because I was much younger at the time, when I was a kid watching Taxi. I mean, he was so good at that act. I really thought at the time, oh, he must really, that must be really his accent, the way he talks. He must really be from another country. Come to find out, no, that was all an act he put on. In fact, one of the first things he did when he appeared on the Tonight Show is he had this Elvis act where he'd have his hair slicked back, and he'd...
I saw that one.
Yeah.
And he was so good at doing Elvis.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I remember that, and I remember being so impressed at how well he did that. But if there's anything about this episode, I highly recommend to anyone to go onto YouTube and look at old guest appearances by Andy Kaufman, because when he was doing these guest appearances, like on the Tonight Show and other guest appearances, he was doing characters that you would watch it and you would like scratch your head going, what planet is this guy from?
Oh, sure.
And that was his thing. That was Andy Kaufman's thing. That was what he was going after, is your reaction to be, what planet is this guy from? And I highly recommend to anyone, search this out, because there are guest appearances that he did on the Tonight Show, and there's guest appearances he's done on other shows that are, sheer genius.
And here's the thing.
Literal genius, because when you look at the time period that Andy Kaufman was doing this, nobody else was doing comedy
like
anywhere near or close to anything like that. But now you have many people that have taken the baton and ran with it and have their own versions of that, and it's kind of almost taken its own genre. But he wasn't following anyone else's footsteps. Andy Kaufman was literally
leading the way,
something that had never been done before. And people were recognizing it at the time, but because it was so different, there were just so many people that just, I can't accept this. I can't do, because it was so out of the box. There was a very large amount of people out there that just didn't know how to take it. You know what I mean? Because it was basically, what planet is this guy from?
And Gar, how Andy Kaufman was such a great comedian? Okay, first of all, the guy died so tragically young. I think he was like in his early 30s. He died of cancer. But the point is, it's not like he had this huge, long career. Although when you think of Andy Kaufman, you do think of, the episodes of Taxi he did as Locke Gravis, and then these appearances on the Tonight Show. It's not like he went on to make a lot of movies. He didn't get the chance to. But what we're left with is that impression, that immediate impression you're talking about. And like I said, if you just look at the appearances he did, with his little Elvis routine on the Tonight Show versus Locke Gravis. Those are almost like two polar opposites of what the guy was capable of doing. I just kind of marvel, had he lived, if he had gone on to live, normal, life a little longer than what he got to live. Who knows? He would have probably gone on to have a legendary career. I dare say he has a legendary career. Just it wasn't very long, but look at in his little bit of life, the impression he made on everybody.
Well, yeah. I remember. I don't think that it very well might be one of his guest appearances on the Tonight Show. But I remember watching him, and they announced him.
Yeah.
And it's just just a regular stage on a talk show, where the comedian's going to walk out on the stage, and he walks out there, and he sets down on a table a record player, or they're sitting on a table a record player, and he goes up to the record player, and he doesn't say a single word. And he puts on the record, and it starts playing this music that the catchy phrase in the music. He's singing a song, but Andy Kaufman's not actually singing. He's lip syncing.
Wow.
And he's lip syncing before anyone had ever thought
to do
of lip syncing to music ever before.
Wow.
This was the first time I had ever seen anyone lip sync to music. And it was just this funky song that was so where the catchy lyrics was, "Here I come to save the day," and he raises his hand in the air every time, and he's lip syncing, "Here I come to save the day," and it was so bizarre, and you're watching it going, what in the world is going on?
With this guy.
And I had never seen anything like that. And then he picks up the record player, and then he leaves the stage. And that was his act. If that video exists today on YouTube, I highly recommend anyone to find it, because it is so out of the box, and it is so crazy. But I was one of the people that watched it. I absolutely loved it. It was comic genius. It literally was comic genius.
Yeah, in fact, it's very interesting. An act like that. I mean, you take music, which is entertainment to begin with, and you combine it with comedy and create an act like that. It's just, I mean, that's one of those guys. He really, Andy Kaufman. He almost like one of the first rock star comedians. I mean, like you described, him hitting the stage like that when he's starting the beginning of an act or the beginning of a show. He knows how to enter the room, and then the way you just describe it, I mean, just leaves the stage with them wanting more and clapping. I could imagine the applause.
The audience didn't know how to react to it either.
Wow.
Some people were kind of clapping because, I guess this is where we're supposed to clap. But he left the audience completely stunned.
And that's, wow. And I urge people that, I forget when it came out, but a number of years ago, there's a movie, I think it's called Man in the Mood, starring Jim Carrey as playing the role of Andy Kaufman. It's kind of a biopic on his life, but that's a fun thing to watch if you're at all an Andy Kaufman fan.
I wanted to see it, and then I just totally forgot about it. I'm gonna check that out, because I definitely there's no one better to play Andy Kaufman
and Jim
than him.
And so another one, another interesting person I came up with as far as getting their start on the Tonight Show is Ellen DeGeneres, another female comedian. Ellen DeGeneres first appeared on the Tonight Show after five seasons, of her TV show. Ellen came to an end. That was kind of a sitcom she had. Ellen, prior to the final season of her sitcom, came out on the Oprah Winfrey Show as a lesbian. On the final episode of Ellen, her TV show, character also came out as a lesbian to her therapist, who was played by Oprah Winfrey. While the final episode of the sitcom was popular, the ratings in the show's final season began to fall, which is why the show was canceled by ABC. And then it said, 2003 to 2017, Ellen DeGeneres reestablished herself as a successful talk show host of her own show, The Ellen DeGeneres Show. The show was won a total of 25 Emmy Awards in its first 3 seasons. So again, she did another one very early on before too many people really knew who she was. Appeared on The Tonight Show as one of the first female comedians to do so, I guess, since Phyllis Diller. People start to think she's funny. She first gets a sitcom, and then when that's canceled, she goes and starts her own successful TV talk show. So again, that's another person that got their start as a result of The Tonight Show.
Well, then there was, it's a literal parade of people by today's standards are icons.
Oh, sure.
People like, there's so many people that got their start, and I never really focused on the people that got their start from the show. It's just, I just focused on more of the people that were guests, that strike memories for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The, singers like Vicky Carr, who people don't know who she is. You know what I mean? Or Mel Tillis. People don't know who Mel Tillis was. Mm-hmm. But back in the day, he was a country music icon. You know what I mean? Bob Newhart. Back in the 1950s, Bob Newhart was considered a groundbreaking, edgy stand-up comedian. Back in the 1950s when he was doing stand-up, he was very groundbreaking and very edgy. But by the time he got to TV and was doing the Bob Newhart Show, his style of comedy was kind of bland. I didn't really get it.
Now, Gar,
here we're talking about another comedian that has an iconic career.
Let me talk when you talk about Bob Newhart, let's talk about how iconic this guy is. I mean, just to give people once again where we are in the world today in 2022, take a guess at how old Bob Newhart just turned.
Oh God, he's got to be in his 90s.
93. Can you believe that?
yeah. But back in the 50s, he was like considered very, very edgy.
Prime time, and I used to watch that Bob Newhart show in the 70s, and kind of a dry humor, but very funny guy, I mean, in his own right. And he even go like in the 80s to go on and have another show called Newhart. And what I remember from that show, that was where he was married to this lady, Joanna. She was a little bit younger than him. They ran this like hotel inn they owned, and they had these 3 brothers, kind of, I think, supposed to be like a Lenny and Squiggy type, but there's 3 of them. This is my brother. I'm Larry. This is my brother Daryl, and this is my other brother Daryl. yeah.
There were so many times that he would have guests, and the guests, virtually all the guests that were on the show, were participating in the funniness of whatever's going on, and none of it is scripted. And when that element would happen, where the guests are contributing and Johnny's contributing, and it's all mayhem, and it's just kind of the show would take the element of, I guess you would call wild card, where when you were watching it at home, you knew that any semblance of following some type of format had gone out the door, and now you were literally watching people just kind of just having fun amongst themselves right in front of you on TV. But you're watching like professional comedians, which can make for some absolute hilarity because they're all riffing off of each other.
And what's interesting
and people watching at home, they're just watching the spontaneity of it.
Yeah.
And that's the real thing that used to happen on his show when he used to do it. There was a lot of times that there were things that were going on the show that were never planned. They just would happen organically and spontaneously.
I mean, you watch those old Johnny Carson episodes, you're absolutely right. That's what he was known for. He was most time he'd go totally unscripted. I mean, he just kind of let it rip. And interesting thing about Johnny Carson, he was kind of the, like I said, masters of ceremony, if you call it. He would kind of run the show whatever direction he wanted. But what I loved about Johnny, he was a real wild card in the sense that that he could hang. Like I think part of the reason he'd have guys like Bob Newhart and Rodney Dangerfield, they were about the same age as him at the time, and so he could kind of really relate to those guys. But then you'd also see him like have somebody like Michael J. Fox, when he was on Family Ties and just getting his start and coming up, he was just a young teenager. Or I remember seeing when they had like even Emmanuel Lewis, remember who played the part of Webster, and he'd have these kids on, these teenagers, and he could just as much relate to them and have a conversation with them. And so it made for really interesting TV.
I just, there were so many times, that, I watched the show and it's so funny because, the show would basically lose control.
Yeah.
But it never really lost control in a negative way.
No. And that's
what I mean?
Yeah.
It was always, when it lost control, it was always losing control in a funny way.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big reason why people kept wanting to tune in, and the show had so much strength because let's watch it tonight. Who knows what's going to happen tonight?
Yeah. In fact, that's the thing. It was the golden era of the Tonight Show. The Johnny Carson era, and the thing of it was, they would just let it rip. You never know what you were going to get the next night until you tuned in, and it was always just the excitement, the anticipation. And the thing of it, Gar, was like you're saying, they would do anything to get a laugh, in a positive way. And it wasn't so much like it is now, where we don't want to offend certain people, and they wanted to make the whole audience laugh. They didn't care about being politically correct. It was more about getting people to have a good time, getting people to laugh and be part of the joke, in a good way. And it's very interesting because when we came up with the idea to do the part 3 of the show today about the guest, see, the reason I when I was doing my research, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we could do more of these episodes on just people that were on the Tonight Show, and it'd be fun because there's no endless there's an endless amount of people that we could be talking about. And it's kind of like how in one episode do you just come up with a list? I try to do the ones that I think kind of okay, they're kind of a highlight of the guest over years. But I was surprised in doing the research how many people really did kind of get their start where they've gone to have a legendary career because of appearing on the Tonight Show. I mean, I was surprised. Like you mentioned, Bob Hope. In my research, I found out Bob Hope was such a popular guest at the time on the Tonight Show that even he was a guest host for a number of years. Now, Flip Wilson, what I did not know, Flip Wilson was a famous black comedian. But listen to this. This was interesting. Okay, remember Red Fox, who we all love as Fred Sanford and Sanford and Son. Red Fox was a well-known comedian at the time, the early days of The Tonight Show. And it said Red Fox appeared on a 1965 episode of The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And Carson asked him, "Hey, Red, who's a real funny comedian? Who do you think's really funny?" And Red Fox told him, "You want to know who I think the most funniest comedian at this point in time?" He says, "Flip Wilson." And because Red Fox named Flip Wilson, who was not as well known as he would go on to become, Johnny said, okay, well, I got to get that guy on my show. And because, he invites Flip Wilson on The Tonight Show, people start laughing. He gets invited back several times. And then from all that, Johnny made him one of the guest hosts on The Tonight Show. That's how Flip Wilson got his start, which I did not even know until I did the research for his. Of course, I'd heard of Flip Wilson and that he had a show of his own in the 70s. But what I went on to find out is that Carson, like I said, then booked Flip Wilson on The Tonight Show, who became a favorite guest on The Tonight Show, as well as appearing on The Ed Sullivan Show. Flip Wilson credited actually Ed Sullivan for providing him with his biggest career boost. In 1970, The Flip Wilson Show premiered on NBC. The Flip Wilson Show ran from up until 1974 and was very popular and generated high ratings. The show was nominated for 11 Emmy Awards, won 2 Emmys, and a Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a TV Series. On November 25th, 1998, Wilson died in Malibu, California from liver cancer at the age of 64. Flip Wilson was also a guest host on several episodes of The Tonight Show, as I said. Now, my point with that is, like I said, we've all heard of Flip Wilson. I had no real idea that because Red Fox named him as, being the funniest comedian he thought at the time, that Johnny Carson goes to book him on The Tonight Show, and that otherwise we may never have heard of Flip Wilson.
Well, Flip Wilson's famous catchphrase, was, when he would tell jokes, it was a reoccurring catchphrase that he would do. The devil made me do it.
Yeah.
And, he would always tell the joke, and then when he would say the devil made me do it was the thing that would make the joke funny. And, he was hilarious. I remember when I was a kid back in the 70s watching the Flip Wilson Show with my parents.
Yeah.
I definitely, all the things that you just said. Yeah, it's all true. His show was a huge success back in those days. And he was very, very, very funny.
And you look at The Tonight Show,
people don't, he's one of those diamonds of a past era.
And here's the thing, in doing this 3-part Tonight Show special, we had to do it in 3 parts really to kind of really give it the justice it deserves. I don't think we could have really done a great show on The Tonight Show otherwise. But one thing, you hear about diversity, Gar, today, modern world in 2022. But you look at something like The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson especially, it was full of diversity. He didn't, there was, I don't think Johnny Carson was a racist or anything like that, and I can say that because, we just talked about somebody like Flip Wilson, got his start on The Tonight Show because of another famous black comedian, Red Fox, mentions him. Red Fox was, like I said, on The Tonight Show many, many times, and that was during his Sanford and Son run, but he used to be a regular guest. Like we mentioned, Phyllis Diller, Ellen DeGeneres, female comedians. So my point is, it was a very diverse show. They didn't care if you were a woman, Chinese, black, white. Everybody was welcome. And I think if you just look at the list of people we've mentioned so far, that kind of just shows that.
Well, I think that we're kind of getting towards the end of this particular episode,
sure.
And I think we would have to mention the fact that Johnny Carson's least favorite guest on his show was Bob Hope.
Interesting. Wow.
He really did not care. His style Johnny's style of comedy was quick-witted responses to what other people say. He was very, very good at being very quick-witted.
Oh, yeah.
And that was part of his comedy aspect, other than his straight man aspect to the comedy. And Bob Hope's style, Bob Hope relied on his writers, and Bob Hope would have virtually everything scripted.
Yeah.
And so when he was the guest on Johnny's show, it was all, provided before Bob Hope would appear. These are the questions.
Yeah.
This is the order that the questions are to be done in, and blah blah blah. And it was all structured and very, there was no spontaneity, even though it appeared to be spontaneous. There was absolutely no spontaneity to what Bob Hope's style of comedy was, and so it didn't really mix well with Johnny's. Johnny's style. Johnny liked liked it to be part of the conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so Johnny literally had to follow the script, asking the questions in the actual order. And if Johnny, because Bob Hope didn't hear that well in his later years, if Johnny didn't follow the script, Bob Hope would wind up giving the wrong response, and it wouldn't go well, and of course that would not go well with Bob. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So Johnny was very, very, very vocal and very, he basically he was, just having Bob Hope on the show to facilitate Bob Hope's wishes.
Yeah, and you got to give it to Johnny for that, because I'd imagine part of the reason, if he wasn't crazy about having Bob Hope on the show, part of the reason he went for it, maybe the NBC brass said, no, he's popular at the time, we should have him on. So maybe.
Well, yeah, they had to.
Yeah,
Bob
so they had
Hope
to.
was an icon.
Yeah, of course.
Nobody wants to piss off Bob Hope, including NBC's brass.
Yeah, and it's interesting in doing this special on the Tonight Show, because, like I said, you just look at all the people that have appeared on the show, and one thing that has been a constant, not just in the Tonight Show special we've done, but in many of the other episodes. I mean, like we mentioned at the top of this episode today, that you did, Gar, about the fact that kind of a passing the baton on the very first Johnny Carson episode, Groucho Mark introduced him, and then as I mentioned today in regards to Phyllis Diller, she appears on Groucho Marx's quiz show before she appears on The Tonight Show. But she makes an appearance on the Ed Sullivan show. Flip Wilson appears on the Ed Sullivan. Many of these guests also appeared on the Ed Sullivan show. It's very interesting how many of these things cross paths. I mean, even because of appearing on the Tonight Show, Flip Wilson not only goes on to get his own show on NBC. They think, okay, this guy appeared on the Tonight Show. We want to see what we can do with him. We want to see if we can, put a spotlight on him and get some more ratings for his station. So funny how that all kind of stuff intertwines.
Well, and then, back in the 60s, the 1960s had their version of the Kardashians. The Gabor sisters, Zsa and Eva Gabor, were guests on The Tonight Show, regular guests on The Tonight Show. And, during the 60s, literally, they were only famous for being, rich and beautiful. They had no talent. You know what I mean? But, but they were guests on The Tonight Show. So, we look at the Kardashians as this, anomaly and everything, and rightly so. There's really no, social benefit that the Kardashians bring to society's table. You know what I mean? They're not really bringing anything constructive to the table. But they're not the only ones. The Zsa Zsa and Eva Gabor were the Kardashians of the 60s, and they had very, very long careers of being just rich and famous.
In fact, by the time we get to the early 90s, I believe it was, a lot of people had forgotten about who Zsa Zsa Gabor. She kind of starts popping up in all these talk shows again, and the news, not because she's got a movie out or anything, or a new TV show or anything, it's because she got in an altercation with a cop in LA and slapped him across the face, and then almost kind of like you said, goes on to this kind of almost tabloid fame, and people start talking about Zsa Zsa all over again, and that's what in the 90s she became known for. It's kind of crazy. And then before we wrap up today's show, another guest on the Tonight Show I think was really worth mentioning as none other than Bill Cosby. It said in 1963, Bill Cosby received national exposure as a stand-up comedian on NBC's Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, which led to a recording contract with Warner Brothers Records for his debut comedy album, Bill Cosby is a Very Funny Fellow, right? In 1983, Bill Cosby released the comedy concert film Bill Cosby Himself, which to this day remains to be regarded as the greatest comedy concert ever by comedians such as Jerry Seinfeld, who considers Cosby to be one of his biggest influences as a comedian, who paved the way for others, stand-up comedians like him, to break into sitcom television.
Well, the truth of the matter is, now Bill Cosby has become
notorious.
Under a dark cloud.
Yeah.
And rightly so, if he's guilty.
Sure.
You know what I mean? If he's guilty, then rightly so.
Yeah.
Now, that aside, because, I'm not a fan, of what he's, being, accused of.
Yeah, I got you.
There's nothing anything about what he was accused of doing, that's good. And if he's guilty of those things, they're horrific. And,
I'm with you.
And I completely abhor all of it.
I'm with you.
And abhor any person that would do those kind of things.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is back in the 80s, when I used to go to video stores to rent videos for what we were going to watch, because that was a hugely popular thing to do back in the 80s.
Sure.
Fridays and Saturday nights, video stores were completely packed.
I remember.
With people looking to rent a video of what they're going to watch that night.
Blockbuster Video.
And, that was, because it was before cable.
Sure.
And all that stuff. And what was available, cable had not become what it is today. And so, to have a wider variety to choose from, you went to the video store.
Oh, sure.
Well, back in the 80s, me and my daughter's mother, when we were together, we went to a video store and we rented that movie or that videotape, Bill Cosby himself.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
To this day, I have never watched a comedy video where I laughed that much.
Wow.
When that video was done, my sides hurt.
Wow.
It was so funny. Now, to this day, if anyone could put aside the horrible things that he's done, and what is, but just to take that comedy on comedy itself, that video is absolutely hilarious. Historically, I have never watched anything or been involved in any, viewing any kind of comedy where I laughed that much.
Yeah, and
it truly is hilarious, and I have huge difficulty. I have to be honest. Even though I'm completely against what he did.
Yeah.
I still can't take away from his talents as a comedian. That video is absolutely hilarious, and if you can get past whatever and watch the video, you'll probably wind up laughing and feeling very guilty about laughing.
Here's the thing, though, Gar, with that. I mean, I think that just kind of shows you if the laughter is as immediate as you say from watching that video. I think it proves that it's funny stuff. I mean, I can sit down myself. I think I've told you. I can watch old episodes of Three's Company. I've seen the episodes. I got them on DVD. I see them over and over. I can watch them countless times, and I laugh just hysterically as the first time I ever saw them, because the comedy in those shows and those old episodes are just so funny. It's so immediate. Anybody's gonna get that. With Bill Cosby, you're right. I don't really approve of what or condone what he did, but you look at his career, like the fact that one of the first things he was known for was Fat Albert. I mean, that's celebrating 50th anniversary this year. One of the first things he ever did on TV, I Spy. And of course, in the 80s, he would do those.
Yeah, he did I Spy before anybody knew who he was.
Yeah.
And I Spy had nothing to do with comedy,
Yeah.
and I really, really did not care for his character in I Spy.
Interesting. And then, of course, he'd go on to do the Cosby Show in the 80s, and we remember him for all those Jell-O gelatin commercials. So the guy had a legendary career, and I think it's a shame that people want to kind of, let's forget about what a great comedian is. I mean, I could go back and watch all these movies or TV things that he did, and I think laugh just as much as ever, just because it was great comedy for when it was made. And again, to kind of wrap this up for today, so like I said, I think when Jay Leno took over the Tonight Show, it was I think 1992. And so again, just to kind of give people an idea of where the world was in 1992, George Bush Sr. was the President of the United States. April 29th, 1992 is when the LA riots take place following the acquittal of 4 LAPD police officers in the alleged beating of Rodney King. And again, 22nd of May, 1992 is when Johnny Carson hosts his very last episode. So again, that's where the world was in 1992 as Jay Leno's taken over reins of the Tonight Show. And I really had fun doing this episode, Gar, and I think I'm going to have fun listening back to all 3 parts now once this gets posted next weekend. And we're going to be posting some of these videos we were talking about, especially like the Andy Kaufman ones, because I think people will just get a laugh out of all that stuff. And another thing I noticed, like in those Andy Kaufman clips I posted on the Facebook page, was, do you remember when they had those crazy curtains of all the different colors? That again, you look at stuff like that and you say, okay, yeah, that kind of shows you, when that was taped. Look at the crazy curtains they had.
Well, please share that stuff about Andy Kaufman, and if you can find that one, here I come to save the day.
I'm gonna look.
If you can find that one, absolutely post it, because how does somebody come up with an idea like that?
I don't know.
To me, it was hilarious, but I know that I'm probably in a minority on that one, because most of America back in the 70s, at that time when it was aired, most of America didn't know what to make of it.
And now
you know what I mean? Just looked at it like they were looking at a car accident or something.
And I think,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when I was watching it, I was like going, "Oh my God, this is hilarious."
I think more.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think all these years later, more people that are in the age group you and I are in are going to have more of an appreciation for that, because now, all these years later, the man died so tragically young. And you talk to anybody that is a comedian or into comedy, one of the names they always mention is Andy Kaufman. And again, I say that because man died tragically young, and yet very much like Randy Rhoads died only at age 24. But look at the impact these guys left on the world. They weren't around very long, but they made people take notice of what they were doing.
Well, some talent, goes like a flash.
Yeah.
And some talent, there's the mercurial talent like the James Dean's. Which is another short career, but turns out to, his fame lives on today.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? And then there's, people like Andy Kaufman, short careers, but it's a really statement on how really talented those short career people that turned out to be icons is still today.
And what's interesting,
and James Dean is another one. You can go into those places where they have memorabilia, where they have Lucy plates,
and
all of this stuff, and you'll find James Dean stuff still sells today.
And what's interesting? You go back and you look at these old Tonight Show clips, these old appearances, and you can tell that some of the appearances, some of the stuff is like dated, and that's the thing is the Tonight Show. I think the best way to kind of end this today, Gar, is saying this. It was kind of all these appearances and these guest spots we were talking about that have appeared on the Tonight Show over the years. Kind of a snapshot of the world, what the world was back then. I mean, like Johnny Carson. Okay, this is the interesting thing about when talking about Johnny Carson. He hosted the Tonight Show for 30 years. I think he's been dead for over 30 years now. So kind of an interesting kind of time gap there. But that's the thing. You look at these shows, 30 years of shows like of Johnny Carson, snapshot of different times in history. Sure, and just to let people know, when Gar and I get together in 2 weeks from now, we're going to have a little pre-Halloween fun, and we're going to be talking about the 1988 film Beetlejuice, which is a Halloween favorite. Every year people love to watch that around Halloween time, and just in general.
It's a tradition for me.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of get into Halloween spirit within our next couple of episodes, and if you could hang on, Gar, I'd like to talk to you for just a minute before I let you go. And that's for this episode. We're going to be airing next week. It's going to post on October 1st, next Saturday. Thanks for doing this, Gar.
Chaotic Riffs Magazine.